5:30, we had a special meeting in executive session to discuss acquisition of real estate and litigation, and at 6 o'clock, a special meeting to conduct business and economic development partnership interviews. Can we all please stand for the pledge of allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can we have the roll call?
Mayor Burien.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Lucy Partoga. Here. Council members Rose Clark. Here. Bob Becker.
Here.
Joan McGilton. Here. Gerald F. Robinson.
Here. Councilmember Jack Block is excused this evening. Can we please have a motion for agenda confirmation?
I move agenda confirmation.
Second.
Please register our votes. The agenda is confirmed unanimously. Next up, we have public comment. Several individuals signed up this evening. Individuals, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Representatives of groups to 5 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record. First up, we have Jen Ramirez-Robson and Steve Dashel from New Futures and Southwest Youth and Family Services.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor Bennett and council members for having us here this evening. My name is Jen Ramirez-Robson, and up until Monday, I was the executive director at New Futures, but I'm very thrilled to announce that as of Monday, we officially merged with Southwest Youth and Family Services, and I have Steve here from that organization as well. And it was just a little less than a year ago that I was here giving you some not so great news about the closure of our site at the Heights of Burien. So this is exciting because we have found a way to grow in an economic climate where that isn't very easy. And I'm also happy to let you know that in the interim as well, we've formed a partnership with Navos, where we have started 2 support groups at their new facility right next to the Heights, a teen group and a women's group. And we have 50 teens in that support group that all live at the Heights. So that's really exciting. And we have 27 women, I think. So. And that's going to continue, but I'll turn this over to Steve for just a second. Well, first I'll let you know that when we started looking at merger last year, we wanted to do something that, we've made cuts, we brought our, expenses in line with our revenues, and we could have stumbled along, we could have, I think, been okay. But we wanted to be more than just okay, because our families, they needed more services, so we started looking at merger. And when we started looking around, not just at compatible services, but who would be like-minded. So let me have Steve tell you a little bit about Southwest.
Thanks, Jen. I'm Steve Dashel. I'm the director of Southwest Youth and Family Services. And we've been around in serving West Seattle, White Center, and South Park for the last 33 years, primarily providing counseling, education, and family support services to youth and families living in those communities. When Jen first brought this notion up to us, she reminded me how many programs we have that are the same or similar. I mean, they do a home visiting program, we do a home visiting program. They do family advocacy and supporting immigrants and refugees to access resources, we do the same thing. They do youth development, we used to do youth development, and it seemed like just a perfect match. And a little historic context, we're part of a 14-member organization countywide called the Youth and Family Service Association, where every school district in King County is served by an organization like ours. Burien was served originally by the Highline Youth Service Bureau. I don't know if you all remember that, but they changed their names to Highline Youth and Family Services. They were taken over by Ruth Dykeman, and as you're all aware, Ruth Dykeman was taken over by Navos. And what's been lost in all those transitions is the youth development component of the work that they used to do. And so there wasn't a youth and family service agency that provided that kind of support for Burien. And that was a real sort of motivator for us to be able to provide, to sort of reestablish that presence in the Burien community. But it's also important for us that there are a number of services that are so far not being given in the form that they should be in this community. And one of those is mental health in the communities that New Futures has worked in. We will be able to provide those services for the residents of those three communities, and we're very excited to be able to do that in the years ahead.
Thank you. And just as a reminder, those two communities, we're in three housing complexes, multifamily housing complexes, 2 in North Burien and 1 in SeaTac. So we're really excited. Our families have been asking for years for more direct counseling services. So we're really excited to add counseling to that holistic approach of services that we provide to the families living there. And I'm also excited to tell you that we are going to have a meet and greet reception here in Burien at Home Task on June 6th. We'll send out more information about that. But with that, we just wanted to update you. We know how near and dear to your heart New Futures is, and we wanted to tell you personally about what was happening.
Can you just do a very brief piece about your breakfast and the scholarship winners? I was so impressed as always. An amazing event.
Sure, absolutely. Well, we did have our 8th annual benefit breakfast at the Grand Hyatt last Wednesday, and we had 3 incredible scholarship winners. We had Gabby Santos, who is at Global Connections High School over at Tyee campus. We had Bruno Murano, and he is at Chinook Middle School. And we had, you may remember last year, there was a young man who came and spoke to you, Alan Basio, and he was our 3rd scholarship winner from the Heights. So obviously they are still considered part of our family, and they gave, as always, very moving speeches.
Tear-jerking speeches.
Yes. But again, it's a great show of support from the community, and we're so pleased that we're going to be able to continue providing those services and more. We're excited about the possibilities of what this merger brings as well, not only maintaining our services, but our staffs got together a couple weeks ago, and they're really excited about some new things that we might be able to do together. So if you have ideas, you can send them my way. Steve will still be the executive director over both organizations, and as of Monday, I became the director of strategic partnerships at Southwest Youth and Family Services, so I'll still be around as well. So send your ideas or questions my way, or Steve's.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your incredible work on behalf of our community, and congratulations on your new job. Okay, I'll read the next few names so you can assemble it. Also note that we do have the hearing on the shoreline master plan, and so that's a separate public hearing. If you want to comment on that, that would be after our normal public comment period right now. So next up we have Dick West, followed by Roger DeLong, followed by Mary Sitterman.
Okay, my name is Dick West. I live at 11006 Roseburg Avenue South, that's Burien, Washington, 98168. I'd appreciate the work that the city manager and the city attorney's done as far as sharing the staff's position on the properties that I've been talking about lately. I believe that the issue to me is about reactive enforcement or about proactive enforcement. And the city attorney was correct in stating that most cities do use a reactive approach. The real question to me is more like, why should we do like the others when we can create something better by using a proactive approach? I don't believe that cleaning up of Burien's $200 million problem has to be expensive at all. In fact, Burien already has all the tools it needs to do the job. It has a well-defined municipal code. It also has a workforce that covers excuse me, most of the streets during the course of a month. I propose that when a city employee spots a problem house, that they take a camera photo picture of it and send it to the compliance officer, and that way the situation is brought to their attention immediately, and that way it can be cleaned up quickly. And at that point, it also largely becomes an administrative issue instead of a staff issue as far as your employees out on the street. And then also the costs that are associated with are fully recoverable, including the staff time. And that will make the issue a revenue positive situation. And in becoming proactive, Burien and neighborhoods will no longer be victimized by these trashy houses and the problems that come with them. And there was some word that the city manager wanted to wait until the next budget cycle to investigate, go proactive. And I'm not certain we really can afford to wait, considering the fact that we are currently right now at number 5 from the bottom as far as our assessed value performance compared to the other cities in King County. And if we continue to do nothing in 4 years, we will really be at the bottom. And these houses, if you were to look at them kind of like graffiti, they have to be dealt with, or if they're not, then ultimately they will multiply. And really, we can't afford to be having this problem continue on. And what I want is that the council to work with the city manager and the city attorney to implement the Burien Municipal Code to clean up these problems. And what will happen then is our city will flourish and our neighborhoods will become desirable. And what I am proposing is a 40 man-hour abatement program that I've attached to the city clerk's copy that you can examine. And if the city manager or city attorney has issues with the numbers, I ask that they bring them back. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Mr. DeLorme.
My name is Roger DeLorme. I live at 13254 2nd Avenue Southwest. My thing is cats and cares. What's wrong with that statement? There is no cats and cares. In the very beginning, when the contract was negotiated, CARES was asked specifically by 2 city council members whether they would take care of cats, and they said yes, but not anymore. Why build and spend the time and money on cat cages if you're not going to use them? Is this not mismanagement? And then now they want a raise. Do they take care of barking dogs? No, they tell you to talk to your neighbor. He might shoot you, but you might want to go talk to him. Stray dogs, you call them. If they answer, that's good. If not, do they ever call you back? No. So now they want more money for doing less. This contract should be renegotiated and sent out for bids. Thank you.
Next up, we have Mary Sitterly, followed by Rachel Levine, followed by Quentin Thompson. I think it's Mary Sitterly is the name here. Mary B. Something that's.
I'm Mary, but I have nothing to say right now.
Oh, okay. So we'll pass on that one then, and Ms. Levine.
Good evening, Council. My name is Rachel Levine. I live at 430 South 124th Street, Burien. And I'm here tonight to make 2 recommendations. The first is that for you, the city council members, and for this audience, and for those who will be viewing this videotape of this meeting, to go to White Center now and view the videotape of the North Highline Unincorporated Area Council supported safety forum that was held last week. It was conducted to cover 2 areas. Sheriff Urquhart was there, and so was Fire Chief Mars. They discussed safety in North Highline in terms of safety, both from the standpoint of personal safety, safety in the streets, and fire safety. I think it will be a very interesting. You will get caught up in it. You will not be sorry that you watched it. The second recommendation I am making to all of you is to please contact Dow Constantine and Joe McDermott to encourage them to, in the strongest possible terms, to maintain the storefront deputy, B.J. Myers, that has been now in White Center for a couple of years, I think. That storefront sheriff in White Center is not only necessary for the people there, but it's for all of you who may go to White Center for a meal or for McClendon's wonderful pancake breakfast or whatever you might do, and for the children who are in that area for whom you pay taxes to support. This storefront deputy is so important to all of our community, all of North Highline. Whether you saw yourself as supporting annexation, sitting it out, not doing anything about it, or supporting annexation, you cannot turn your back on your neighbors and friends and children who depend on the King County sheriffs now for their safety. And I just can't encourage you enough to find out more about what is happening and what King County is trying to do to make up, to mitigate the loss of the funds that would have been there to support the safety that all of us deserve. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson.
Good evening, audience, and good evening, council members. Two things I would like to say this evening, and that is I wanted to say about New Futures. I'm very glad to hear the good news because I've been saying a lot of prayers, and I was trying to figure out with Councilmember Clark how we might be able to figure out a way to bring New Futures back. So that is the best news I've heard this evening. That's number one. And then the other thing is I'm going to talk to you guys tonight about CARES. When I brought up the fact about animal control from 2010 and 2011, the sheriff who we had wanted to get rid of animal control because it was dispatched through the King County Sheriff's Office and it was costing a lot of money. CARES is a good organization to do what they need to do, not only for the dogs, not only for the animals and the cats, but they do have a lot of calls throughout the day. I haven't been able to go down and check out the site, but I do know that their lines are very busy. So the people that are trying to get a hold of them, they need to keep trying. And I know it's time consuming, but they do answer their calls. And in fact, I called up there not too long ago, and I was able to talk with the director of that organization, and she really encouraged me to come in and look at the facility because it's costing animal control to do the service that CARES is doing a lot of money that the county does not have, and that is why it's been switched over to CARES. And I really strongly wanted to put that out there because with the economy the way that it is, we have to figure out as citizens in the city of Burien how we are going to keep the cost down. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of the individuals that have signed up on our sign-up sheet. If anyone else would like to comment in the general public comment portion, please go ahead and assemble at the podium now. And if it's for the Shoreline Master Plan, you can do so later. I don't see anyone coming up, so we'll go ahead and move on. Next item on our agenda is correspondence for the record. We have a number of emails and letters that are available for viewing in the packet, which is also available online. Next item is our consent agenda. Can we please have a motion to approve?
I move approval of consent agenda.
Can we go ahead and register our vote? Consent agenda is approved unanimously. It brings us to our business agenda. The first item tonight is a motion to approve appointments to the Business and Economic Development Partnership.
Thank you. The motion, I move to appoint Judy Coover, Carmen Gores, Dean Anderson, Dan Matthews, Matt Linwin, and Jay Hasbrook to the Burien's Business and Economic Development Partnership to full terms beginning on May 6, 2013 and ending on March 31st, 2017. Thank you.
Okay, any discussion, comments? Seeing none, can we go ahead and register our votes? Motion is approved 5-1 with Councilmember Edgar voting against. Congratulations to all the new members of the partnership. We appreciate your willingness to serve our community. Looking forward to working with you for the next 4 years. Next up on our business agenda is a public hearing and discussion regarding an alternative proposal to the Department of Ecology regarding Burien Shoreline Master Program update. Will Senior Planner David Johansson please describe the matter under consideration?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Bennett, members of the City Council, David Johansson, Senior Planner with the City of Burien. I have a brief presentation to introduce the item, which is basically to the council to conduct a public hearing regarding an alternative proposal to the Department of Ecology. And following that hearing, the council may discuss and provide direction to staff in preparation for action towards the end of May. So what I'd like to briefly do is, since we've covered a little bit of this in a study session, is just give some background. This process started a number of years ago, initially with the Shoreline Advisory Committee, which met numerous times, along with some public open houses that the city conducted. And that was to put together the initial, one of the initial versions. Then that went to the Planning Commission, who held 8 meetings and 1 public hearing and worked on the document quite a bit. That was followed by another round of meetings, 7 to be exact, with the City Council. And we did something a little bit unique as well. We held some community forums where we had a good, healthy discussion on a number of the issues. Of course, the City Council also held a public hearing in August of 2010. That ultimately culminated in a passing of a resolution to submit our proposed Shoreline Master Program to the Department of Ecology. And Ecology then conducted their own hearing. So we received comments back from Ecology. They were in the form of both required and suggested changes. We had a number of discussions again with the council on those changes. Ultimately, we accepted almost all of the suggested changes, but we just couldn't quite come to terms on 4 issues, and I'll talk about those in just a little bit. So that's kind of where we more or less stalled out. Then the city was approached by the Burien Marine Homeowners Association with some potential ideas and solutions. And one of the ideas was to form a working group to work on these topics. The council did that and formed a shoreline working group to work on those 4 issues. So more recent background, so the work of the working group is basically a lot of detailed analysis, information gathering, working and talking through options, and of course developing text to find solutions to these 4 outstanding issues. There was numerous check-ins by the working group to the City Council just to make sure they were going in the right direction. Ultimately, there was also a lot of coordination with the Department of Ecology, and ultimately, towards the end, we got a favorable response from the Department of Ecology on the resolution to these items. So, what are the 4 issues? Again, at a very high level, what we've been working on and looking at is the marine riparian buffers. This was we of course started with somewhat larger buffers. Ultimately, the City Council in the resolution went with very small buffers or setbacks, 20 foot, and that of course is one of the primary issues that Department of Ecology has. The next is clarifying language about when a home is destroyed and what kind of shoreline stabilization can be reconstructed. The proposal before you basically clarifies that language in also, it clarifies the language, and DOE, of course, is accepting of the language that we're looking at. Item number 3 is the removal of the restriction on watercraft access from public access areas along Lake Burien. Basically, Department of Ecology said that they would not accept that limitation. Finally, is number 4 is more of a process-related question. What I mean by process is the permit review process. Currently, Ecology is requesting that if we reduce buffers, which you may do, they are requesting that you apply for a shoreline variance for that. The city initially suggested that that wasn't necessary, but that's something that Ecology is requiring. So, what do we have for the documents? So, in the documents before you, we have the Department of Ecology required changes, and they've all been inserted. Those are primarily focused on the 4 topical areas that I just mentioned. The language from these is primarily provided by the Shoreline Working Group. Staff, we certainly helped on a couple of occasions to add language and clarify for administrative purposes. There's also suggested changes to the text that Ecology suggested and we agreed to, so we've inserted those as well. There were a number of changes where the city agreed with the required changes from Department of Ecology, but we added, or we suggested there be some other text just for clarification purposes. And again, non-substantive, it's just to help us use the document on a day-to-day basis. Then, of course, there's just, as with any new document, a lot of minor editorial fixes. Finally, there's the supplements to the appendices, and this was a huge work effort by the Shoreline Working Group. And those appendices support the topics, the 4 topics, and how they're being resolved. So we had our study session on April 22nd. What have we done with the documents since that time? And these are just a few of the more substantive items. There's a lot of minor editorial work that went on, but these are the more substantive items that were new since that version. So we added the term permitted to the table. So when you put the letter P in a table, you want to say what does P mean, and you want to be clear on that. On page 1, and these are your council packet pages to clarify. So there was a comment at the study session about using the right wetland identification and delineation language, and what document and what version to use. We went and talked with DOE, who actually used the language that DOE recommends. This was a new item that I personally wasn't aware of, and we basically used the language from suggested by Department of Ecology, so that has been inserted. We also clarified the review process when we used the impact assessment worksheet. You may recall from the study session is there is a kind of a simpler option where you can use a worksheet to determine whether you're achieving no net loss. This just clarifies that that actually has to be reviewed by staff or verified by staff, I think is the language that we use, for accuracy. So that's just a standard, it just clarifies the permitting and review process for that. One of the more robust things that we worked on was the common setback line language. When we initially started looking at the buffers, the zone 1 and zone 2, we didn't really look at the provisions for the common setback approach. And so we made sure that we went back and the new buffer approaches, zone 1 and zone 2, can also be applied with the common setback provisions. So those initially, on your April 22nd draft, those didn't work well together, and so we fixed that. The next item is we added the definition of net acre, and this is where I have to apologize. I inadvertently gave you the wrong version of definition. So on your dais, I've included the one page that has the definition of net acre. It's posted correctly. The correct version is on the planning website, but somehow with all the versions flying around, I got the wrong one in the packet, so I apologize for that. But we did add that definition. That definition of net acre comes from our comprehensive plan. It was defined in our comprehensive plan. We just inserted it into the Shoreline Master Program. And of course, there has been work by the Shoreline Working Group, and they've done some updating to the appendices. So you have that in your documents as well. So where does that leave us? Of course, tonight is May 6th, where we're receiving comment and having discussion. Staff is certainly looking for direction on the document, and then we will continue to refine if necessary. And then we're scheduling a potential action on May 20th. So that concludes my presentation.
Okay, thank you. So the public hearing is now open at 7:31 p.m. Following are the rules of order for conducting tonight's public hearing. All comments by citizens for and against the proposal shall come forward as I call your name. Any persons making comments shall first state their name and address for the record. Individuals will have 3 minutes to comment. Those representing a group or organization shall have 5 minutes. These rules are intended to give every person an opportunity to be heard. First up this evening, we have Michael Noakes.
Good evening, my name is Michael Noakes. I live at 16409 Maplewild Avenue Southwest. Tonight I come before you in my traditional role as president of the Burien Marine Homeowners Association rather than as a member of the Shoreline Working Group. The BMHA would like to formally express its support of the revised draft of the update to the Burien Shoreline Master Program. We ask that Council vote to submit this revision to the Department of Ecology for their review, and we urge DOE to approve this revision. Additionally, we would like to thank the Council, the City staff, the membership of the BMHA, and all the citizens of Burien for their tireless efforts during this extended process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, Carol Jacobson.
Good evening. I'm Carol Jacobson. I live at 3324 Southwest 172nd Street. And I too would like to thank the council and the city staff, and especially the working group, for all the work that was done on these 4 issues. I think it's an awesome thing that this city was willing to work with the citizens like happened with this particular project on the S&P. And most of all, I'd like to thank Michael Noakes, because he, yes, don't shake your head, he did the most awesome job of documenting what needed to be documented, and has just spent, I can't tell you how many hours and how much energy he has put into this project. So as a member of BMHA, I'd like to thank everybody for their support and contributions to this project. I'm also a member of the Three Tree Point Property Rights Association, and I just feel like I have to take this one last opportunity to reiterate that we still have issues with the public access part of the Shoreline Master Program, and I realized that that was not one of the 4 final issues that was to be addressed. But our specific complaints about that process have been documented, or that particular section have been documented numerous times, both in writing and in public hearings. And there is in the public record a letter from a lawyer who represented the Three Tree Point group, another red line version of the S&P where there were a lot of suggested changes by the BMHA lawyer for changes to that section, and none of those changes have been incorporated into this particular version of the S&P. So I just feel like I want it on there one more time that we still have issues with that section. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next up, we have Chastine Egbert.
My name's Chastine Egbert. I live at 1811 Southwest 152nd Street, Burien, Washington. I'm here speaking for a group, the Lake Burien Neighborhood. I would just like to make this clarification. While perhaps the council individually had been updated repeatedly on what the ad hoc group was doing and what were going to be parts of this revision, the rest of us as the public had not. And so I bring to you 7 comments. I don't even know if I'll make it through that in the 5 minutes provided. But this really was the first time that we had a chance to see what the ad hoc group had done. So these are the public comments relating to those drafts, updates, and supplements. In 2010, the Lake Burien residents brought to the council a document prepared by Rob Suzette in which the inventory of the plants and animals that are that use Lake Burien, that spell out what that habitat was used for, and are noted in Rob's document. We brought that forward. The council voted to include that in the appendices, and for some reason or another, that has not been included in it. And I have given it to Monica Lusk. We feel that that should be included. In addition to that, the best available science document 2011 that was just completed for the city of Burien notes that those kinds of habitats and habitat usage should be included in documents that serve as critical areas ordinance documents. And this, certainly the Shoreline Master Plan serves as that. So we're asking that that be included as it was voted on in 2010. Monica has it. She'll distribute it to the council. In addition to that, we have a concern. You saw the 5 items, the 4 items that were supposed to be considered by this group, and it appears really that the issue with the buffers was to be considered for the marine shoreline. Some way or another, the Lake Burien shoreline now has gotten woven into that, and it really shouldn't. It was for the marine shorelines, and that's what DOE had stated was the purpose of it. So now why Lake Burien has gotten into it, we're not quite sure. But these are the comments that I have related to the red line version that was put out. Number 1, on pages IV, that would be 4, Roman numeral 421 through IV 22, there is a process created for no-net calculation. That no-net calculation is flawed in the fact that it does not discuss some of the other no-net loss factors that once you get into the point of working in the setback, then impact the buffers that were not considered. So we are saying that that calculation has a flaw in it, and we want it noted. In addition to that, items 4B on page 420, okay, through 424, create a methodology for moving into the buffer by this mathematical sort of dance that's done between zone 1 and zone 2. While that may be appropriate for the marine shoreline, because that was one of the items discussed by DOE that needed to be done, it is not appropriate for Lake Burien. And the reason that it's not appropriate for Lake Burien is because it then creates this thing which is called creep, which is not supposed to happen. And already in the marine shorelines that are terribly degenerated and deteriorated, that may not be a significant issue. But in the Lake Burien shoreline, which has setbacks of anywhere from 80 to 125 feet, that kind of creep is significant. And we are objecting to that, and we're requesting that the methodology and the computation table that's used in 4B from pages IV 21 through IV 24 be used only for the marine shorelines and not apply to Lake Burien. We feel that that will cause net loss to the lake if you allow that kind of calculation to be used for Lake Burien. The next thing, the optional method that is noted in 4-22 talks about unavoidable impacts, and yet it's not clear what unavoidable impacts will be to that buffer. There's not a list of what unavoidable impacts are. So we raised the question, what's the difference between an unavoidable impact and I just want to do it, okay? So how does somebody using this sheet decide what's an unavoidable impact that should be involved in moving into that buffer versus I just want to do it? I want a 3-car garage instead of a 2-car garage, okay? It's not defined, it's not explained.
Is that your, can I ask you to wrap up?
Yes, okay, yes, the other thing that I'd like to mention to the council is that there are 7 items. I ask you to review them. One of our concerns has been that land use for the Lake Burien area should have been covered in the Shoreline Master Plan. We've asked for it repeatedly. it should be used as a methodology to prevent no net loss, which the lake is having. And repeatedly, the city staff and the council has refused to allow that to be looked at. And we have checked with the Growth Management Board, and they say that in this update, that is something that should be looked at, that there is net loss occurring to that shoreline. A methodology for it should have been developed, and there is nothing that's come forward for it. So I want that on the record that we've said that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have James Burrows. Okay, we'll give you a pass then. Next up, we have Jennifer Kropak, I believe is the last name.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Kropak. I live at 2681 Southwest 151st Place, and I'm here tonight to speak to mostly my appreciation and thank you to the Burien City Council for slowing down this shoreline management program process. I really appreciate that. One, you followed the City Council goal to engage the community that you heard show up for this issue. And secondly, you have now established land uses that reflect community values more appropriately. Second, I'd like to thank Michael Noakes for all his research and input put in that made this end product so much better than the first one I came and did a public comment on. Third, while interning at the Department of Ecology in the early 1990s, my boss told me that ecology was foremost an agency for the citizens of Washington State, and not just for the environment. And this, slowing down this public process makes me feel like that is true again. Lastly, I would like to thank you, the city staff, for going through this challenging, long time. And I also would like you to reconsider the lake buffers versus the shoreline Puget Sound saltwater buffers. I think there should be reconsideration to that topic. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak during this hearing this evening? If so, please go ahead and assemble. Okay, seeing no one else, there being no further testimony, the public hearing is closed at 7:42 p.m. So with that, do we need to decide anything else this evening?
Staff would very much like to understand if we will be able to bring this back to council at your next meeting for adoption.
Okay. Any further questions or comments from council? Deputy Mayor Krakowiak.
Thank you. I have a few questions, comments. I read and digested the document, and I met with David Johansson and Michael Noakes to understand it better. And there were just a few things that I wanted to see if we might consider. One was, and I think two people mentioned it here tonight, that with the DOE requiring us to look at 4 possible changes, we addressed the marine buffer change, but I think it was unintentional that the freshwater buffer was brought into it. So I would ask us to consider separating those two and making the mitigation worksheet and the mitigation program only for the marine buffer, and protecting the freshwater buffer so that that remains unaffected by that mitigation program. The second thing is that, and the rest of my, the other one in the document, the SMP, is there's an access path that's mentioned for the Zone 1 buffer. And I'm a little concerned that that would be an impervious surface, and that's going to impact that critical buffer quite a bit. So I was wondering if we could get more specifics on what kind of material, pervious surface, possibly to let the water through, and then if we have a maximum size. And then the others involve the metrics, and I think the metrics was an amazing work. So I would just, going through the metrics and having my background as a biologist and working with the forestry department at the UW, I did a lot of studies with vegetation, and I think the metrics, if we could separate the metrics, and I wanted to ask Michael if that's possible to separate out the marine and the freshwater metrics and allow the freshwater metrics to have a wetlands component. So, looks like you're nodding your head.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
And so I'd like to ask the council to consider that. And then, because the metrics is a great resource for information for our community, I would love to, if it's possible, to have the data and the calculations along with that for the record. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Councilmember Edgar.
Thank you. Also, I'd like to thank Michael Knox for doing the documentation. It's a big task. I think it's something that for many cities in the Puget Sound region, I'm not sure many of them went to that level of detail, but what it does is provide is a good baseline to start from. So as we look down the road X number of years, we'll have something to refer back to. And I agree that if the city has that data, it's something that we can refer to. Realizing that a lot of it was based on observation, it wasn't real scientific, but at least it's anecdotal and it's enough to provide a good baseline. I too met with Michael Knox and David Johansson and reviewed some of the questions that I had. And I still have a couple of concerns. They've already been voiced, but I'd like to reiterate them. One is that the intent of the 4 items that came out of the DOE, there was only one that was affecting Lake Burien, and that had to do with the elimination of prohibiting watercraft should public access occur. And that was the only thing that was on there. So how Lake Burien, the freshwater, got rolled into the regulations on buffering, I agree it should be separated, Michael, if that's possible. And perhaps the regulations should have a brief statement that says these are for something like this, for shoreline, marine shorelines for mitigation purposes, because that's really, I think, the intent that was behind those. And in the document, if you've noticed, there had a chance to read the technical documents, Michael had identified some key indicators for shoreline and buffers and things that are to be protected. One of them was a component of wetlands. And the metric that is proposed in the technical documents primarily focuses on the saltwater marine, and there's nothing that really incorporates that indicator for freshwater. So, Michael, is that possible to include that in that calculation that you've done? I appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Ross.
Yeah, I want to comment on a couple of things that were brought up. There was some concern about the formulas for replacement resulting in moving development closer to the shoreline. It was our conclusion that it would actually have the opposite effect of moving development farther from the shoreline, because it creates the greater incentives for restoring property from a developed or partially developed condition back into a natural condition in the areas closest to the shoreline by allowing you to do development farther from the shoreline in exchange. Our discussions when we were going through this on the committee really focused on the marine shoreline and not Lake Burien as far as the development buffers go. So if Michael can come up with some idea to do that, I'm fine with that. And to answer the question about the path to the beach, that was part of the discussion, was the way it was working out, you wouldn't be able to, you might own waterfront property but not be able to reach the beach. And so the thought was a reasonable use for waterfront property owners would be some pathway to reach the beach, even if all of the area closest to the beach was in a natural condition. That was the idea there, and then that's the language in there. The minimum size designed to serve this purpose. We talked about limiting no impervious or semi-pervious surface on the path, and then the question came up, what about somebody that's in a wheelchair or uses crutches? And we need to allow a little more leeway for that, and so that's why the language about flexibility is in there. The thought was, though, that that would be an allowed use, just because that's a reasonable use of the waterfront property.
Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
So thanks, Jerry, for the clarification. And I understand the path and getting to the waterfront. I'm just concerned about the type of material used, and that, if at all possible, could we encourage pervious rather than impervious, because that buffer is to allow for a filter system, and if we then start allowing impervious surface, then we defeat the function of the buffer. So it'd be great to hear what other council members feel about that. And then I agree with you that the mitigation piece for the zone 1 and zone 2 was to create incentive to have development farther away from the shore and closer, and I think it was unintentional that it actually, for Lake Burien, creates incentive to actually cause development closer to the shore, because it can go into zone 2 now, and before it could not. So that's why I'm asking, and I think a couple of citizens mentioned that if we could just make this mitigation program applicable to the marine shoreline and leave the freshwater shoreline as it was in the original document. Thank you.
Okay, so seeing no further comments, we'll consider the topics that were brought up. First is Deputy Mayor Kukoviac's question about separating the Lake Burien buffer from the marine shoreline buffer. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Johansson. I was going to first request this of you. So do you have any thoughts on whether this would be problematic from the DOE's perspective to separate?
No, I don't believe so. For the separating the fresh versus the marine,
Yeah.
the indication that I haven't had a direct conversation, but there's been an indication that that's something that they could work with. It's just the function of putting the language together, and I'm fairly confident that we can separate the lake, buffer issue from the marine buffer issue in time. Not that time is the major consideration, but it's certainly, we'd like to keep to our schedule. But I think it's something that we can come up with language if given direction from the council.
And so, is it your view also that it would lead to less development closer to the shoreline if we removed the freshwater from those calculations?
That I don't think I'm prepared to answer right here. I'd have to look at that question a little bit more.
Because I would be very curious to understand the consequences of that action. Any further thoughts on Deputy Mayor Kukoviac's question?
I've got no problem with just putting a fixed buffer around Lake Burien if that's what the council wants to do.
Fixed 30 foot.
30 foot, 50 foot, 100 foot, whatever is.
30 plus 15, right?
Which was in the original.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not allowing any development in that zone 2.
And
Yeah, the buffer, they changed it from a buffer to a setback to the zone 1 buffer, the zone 2 buffer, and the zone 2 buffer.
Well, that's what I was, why not just make it a straight 35 foot setback then?
35 foot setback.
Well, I think we 45, right? 30 plus 15.
It's on page 197.
45.
I think we have to be careful if we're going to call everything a setback, because I think according to building codes, setbacks can be used for certain things and buffers cannot.
So for clarity, it's on page 197, and it's figure 5, and it shows shoreline buffer zone 1 for Lake Burien, it's 30 feet, and shoreline buffer zone 2 is 15 feet.
Well, that's why we came up with in the committee, that's why we came to the shoreline buffer zone 1 and zone 2, was so that it was this whole difficulty of what's the difference between a setback and a buffer. The idea being that in a buffer, you might be able to do something under some circumstances, whereas in a setback, that's just a building line that you can't build past. I'd be fine with just putting a 45-foot setback around Lake Burien.
Or how about a 45-foot
Setback can't build
buffer?
in it. That sounds like that's what people are asking for.
Well, here it says on page 200, 4B, New developments that result in adverse impacts may occur in Zone 2 if those impacts are mitigated and the total development activity achieves a no net loss using that worksheet. So these changes have now caused a creep, which is mentioned later in the document for Lake Burien that wasn't there before. So all I'm saying is, can we have this only apply this 4B and this worksheet, this mitigation worksheet, to the marine shorelines and keep the freshwater shoreline as it was in the original shoreline master plan?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I just wanted to add clarification, as I think it's been portrayed accurately. Zone 2 is a little bit soft, and there's things that you can do in there. So I think what I'm hearing is for the lake, the 45-foot distance, we'll call it for right now, should be a no-touch area or a no-build area.
Well, just how it was previously before the ad hoc group
Right.
came up with this worksheet.
Yeah.
And so I support the Mayor Provia's request, as long as I'm not misunderstanding that changing it back wouldn't lead to development closer to the water.
Well, what exactly is that request?
So the request, as I understand from Deputy Mayor Proviac, is to just remove Lake Burien from the calculation and the change that we made with the to the Zone 1 and Zone 2, and put it back to, we had the buffer, 30-foot buffer and the 15-foot setback, and just remove the lake from those calculations.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Okay, so it sounds like we have majority support for that. And mine, like I said, is just contingent on if there is a change, if I'm misunderstanding that, and that would lead to potentially more development, I would like to know about that before we move forward.
I would see that the proposal you have now would potentially, as noted, potentially allow more things closer to the water on the lake.
Okay, so I think
As
we have,
compared to the previous version.
okay, so I think we have support then for Deputy Mayor Kukoviac's proposal there. And then the further questions we have another question about the metrics. I think that was kind of a question for the ad hoc committee, though, that they were just potentially going to be able to take care of. Okay. And then we have the question of the path and encouraging pervious surfaces on the path. And I don't know if Mr. Johansson or Mr. Robson, you commented on a little bit more. Do we encourage pervious surfaces already, or I think it sounds like that was already discussed?
Well, our thought was paths should have an impervious surface, should be close to just, a dirt track down to the beach as possible, but recognizing that for some people that's not going to be a usable approach,
Okay.
and giving more flexibility to accommodate different people while keeping it as minimal as possible.
Okay. Councilman Wright?
Yes, I noticed on the path, material for path, I know a number of times council has attempted to encourage the city and the public to use impervious surface or low impact development. So we might consider using or requiring or considering that there be some sort of impervious type of surface that's hard. It could be pervious cement, it could be pavers, it could be something that allows more infiltration than
Pervious or semi-pervious?
pervious or semi-pervious.
Okay. Mr. Johansson, did you?
Yeah, I was just going to add, we could probably at least add more directive languages, like when feasible or when possible, pervious surfaces shall be used, given the characteristics of the site, because sometimes surfaces aren't going to work on steeper slopes, and so you got to work with each site as the conditions present themselves. So we could certainly steer that in that right direction by using that type of language.
Now, we also, in the committee, talked about the boardwalks or stairs should be allowed, and came to the conclusion that that is an alternative that should be allowed with the same kind of considerations. And one of the issues, of course, in the shoreline is that might be a way to avoid creating an erosion problem also.
Councilmember McGilman?
I would think it might be beneficial before we get too far down this road to look at ADA standards. They might have some ideas for what compromises wheelchair safety or somebody walking with a cane or a walker, because pervious surfaces are not smooth. So I think there might be some ADA suggestions that would help through this process.
Okay, I think those were the requests we had before us. Seeing no further comments then, Mr. Johansson or Ms. Martin, do you guys need any further direction from us?
I think so. I think we can do it, yeah.
If David's telling me that we could return to council at your next meeting and incorporate those changes, and if that's agreeable, we would look to adopt that document with those changes at your next meeting.
Okay. Great. Thank you again for your tremendous efforts in working through this and patience.
Point of order. Can we have that as a discussion item with the intention to move it?
Yeah, we'll bring it back on the business agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, next up on our business agenda tonight is a discussion of ordinance number 580, a supplemental appropriation amending the 2013-2014 biennial budget for legal and consulting services related to the Burien Town Square project.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Before you is a proposed ordinance to do a supplemental budget in order to fund the two different services in the professional services budget for economic development. The first item is for legal services related to Burien Town Square project, and this has to do with the engagement of the law firm of Davis Wright for Maine. They serve as the counsel for legal matters related to the disposition and development agreement with Urban Partners. They also cover the standstill agreement with Harbor Urban and also the transactional documents related to the purchase of Town Square. The budget amendment that we are discussing, the original budget was $30,000 for professional services. This particular segment would be an additional $475,000 for professional services, and that would cover legal services relating to litigation, mediation, and settlement negotiations for the Town Square project. The second item is also related to Burien Town Square project, and we consulted here is Parkland LLC, and they serve as advisors for matters related to the review and analysis of the project proposals related to the remaining undeveloped parcels, as well as general market analysis. And this is an additional $25,000 for a total amendment of $500,000. The total budget item then therefore would be $530,000. And the intent, if you're approving or wanting to move forward, would be that this would come back on May 20th.
Okay. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, Councilman Grant.
Just out of curiosity, do we know where that money will be coming from in the budget?
It'll be coming from your contingency.
Okay, so do we need a motion then for this, or just kind of consent on putting on consent
Yeah,
agenda?
we just like direction for consent.
Okay, do we have that consent, saying consent for the council? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Trimble. With that, we'll move on to a presentation of the first quarterly 2013 financial report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Jim Kraus, Finance Director. The purpose of this agenda item is to present the first quarter financial reports. This report has a lot of numerical detail that will not present well on television or to the audience, so I'm going to review the hard copy report starting with page 335 of your packet. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to Councilmember Edgar, who met with me on a couple of occasions and provided invaluable input as to the layout of this report. The report format is similar to the presentation of the adopted budget. It is by fund, with the general fund first. Revenues are presented first for each fund, and then expenditures. Each fund is presented with a year-over-year comparison. First quarter 2013 in the first set of columns, first quarter 2012 in the second set of columns. The last column contains the preliminary year-end 2012 actuals. The 2012 year-end actuals are unaudited and will change. The majority of governmental revenues and expenditures are seasonal, so the important comparison is the percentage of budget column. It is the third column of numbers for each year in the presentation. If you look at your packet, page 335, the first section of numbers for the general fund are tax revenues. If you look at the total of tax revenues in 2013, we've collected $1.452 million, or 9.27% of our budget, versus $1.459 million, or 9.1% of our budget in 2012. This means we are right on target.
Is everybody tracking where she is on the document? Okay.
Overall, we've collected 12.82%, or $2,568,000 of our budgeted revenues in 2013 versus 13.42%, or $2,760,000 of the budgeted revenues in 2012. Again, we are right on target. Now if you go to the next page, 336, the general fund expenditures are shown just like the budget. First by department, and second summarized by expenditure line item. Please look at the total expenditures before transfers, which is the sixth line up from the bottom. In 2013, we've spent $2,001,000, or 9.97% of the budget, and in 2012, we spent $1,978,000, or 9.67% of the budget. Again, we're right on target. Now I want to talk a little bit about the 2012 actuals. As you can see, we grew our fund balance significantly in 2012. Half of this is the result of some one-time revenues that include $750,000 in utility reimbursements for the First Avenue South settlement. These funds were used to reimburse the general fund for the litigation expenses incurred in 2010 and 11. We also received almost $400,000 in one-time revenues as a result of the utility tax audit. This money was really earned in prior years and will not recur. On the expenditure side, we saved over $1.2 million in expenditures that were one-time savings. The total amount added to fund balance for one-time revenues or expenditure savings is almost $2.4 million in 2012. If you'll recall, we balanced the 2013-14 budget by using $1.1 million in general fund reserves. We can use the funds we added to the fund balance in 2012 to repay the general fund reserves for the 2013-14 budget.
Can I pause on that? That's a really key point in this presentation. So to balance the 2012 budget, we went to the general fund reserve to the tune of about $1.1 million. What Kim just told you is that because of the collection of one-time revenues, significant one-time revenues, we have paid back the reserve that was used to balance the budget in 2012 with money left over. Notable among that, the one-time revenue was a utility tax audit that Kim initiated about a year ago.
Yeah, about a year and a half. Well, we've collected well over $600,000 so far. $400,000 went to this fiscal year.
So we didn't know exactly how much would result from that audit. It was recently pretty much concluded, I believe. And that was Kim's doing, to go back and actually look and see what taxes were going somewhere they shouldn't be going. Some of that was attended to the 2010 annexation, for example. So a major takeaway from the presentation I'd like to leave council with is that the money that was spent out of the reserve to balance 2012 budget is paid back and then some.
And there would also, the savings and the expenditures would also be enough to cover the appropriation that you might approve at the next meeting for the Dan's request that he just got the $455,000.
Funds for remediation.
Burien, like most cities, still has a structural deficit that needs to be addressed long-term. The structural deficit is primarily due to the loss in assessed valuation that caused the city to hit its property tax cap of $1.60 per thousand of assessed value. The growth in the 2012 general fund reserves allows the city more time to figure out how to address this deficit and repay the reserves that we use to balance the budget.
So importantly, there is acknowledgement of the fact that we lost revenue like every other city because of the we reached our cap, the $1.60 per thousand of property tax. Nothing else happened here. It wasn't over expenditures. It was very. It's never happened in my career to most city managers, as far as I know. It's quite unusual. But one of the keys here is that the money that, one of the reasons we're doing well at the moment is because we've had significant one-time revenue that Kim has described. The structural deficit is not about one-time revenue or one-time expenditures. It's about ongoing revenues and ongoing expenditures. The information that she's giving you now means that the structural deficit that we thought might occur in 2016, 2017 has been pushed out a year, 2 years, and a lot can happen between them. But I want to make the point that we haven't solved the structural deficit just because we have significant one-time funds coming in. The structural deficit, like every city, every agency in the whole state has, to my knowledge, will only be solved with additional ongoing revenue.
Now if you turn to the next page, 337, and we'll talk about the street fund. This fund is also laid out just like the budget. On the revenue side, we've received $384,000, or 18.84% of the revenues, versus $300,000, or 19.03% of the revenues last year, right on target. If you look at total expenditures, which is 5 lines up from the bottom, we've spent 11.67% this year versus 10.92% last year, which is also right on target. The next page, 338, is the swim fund. You'll see that we've collected 2.53% of our swim fund revenues this year versus 5.65% last year. Last year we collected more because we had an anomaly due to a Department of Ecology grant reimbursement that we received in the first quarter. If you look at the total swim fund expenditures, we've spent 9.16% this year versus 13.49% last year. But if you look at the total dollars, it's almost exactly the same. The 2013 budget includes $350,000 for a Vector truck, so that's why our expenditures as a percentage are less than last year. The rest of this page and the next 2 pages contain the remainder of the operating funds. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about the funds we just reviewed or those next funds. Otherwise, we can talk about capital projects. Okay, capital projects it is. If you go to page 341, the capital improvement projects report is presented just like it used to be in the old quarterly reports. It includes all 3 of the CIP funds, parks and general government, transportation and surface water management, and the 2013 budgeted projects are listed beneath each fund title. Each project shows a budget authority through 2013, the project to date expenditures through March 31st, and the remaining budget. Does anybody have any questions about those?
Okay. I have a question. So the middle column expended through March 31st, 2013, that's from the date of inception of the program. It's not from January 1st.
Correct.
Correct.
It's project to date.
Okay, thank you.
And I'd like to call council's attention under transportation capital projects, the second project, First Phase South, Phase 2. That's First Avenue. See the $9 million there? You'll see in the city manager's report that we expect to substantially complete that project next month on budget, under budget and on schedule. So major capital project. This is the first major capital project that Maya Andrews, our new Public Works Director, has been in charge with. And just wanted to point that out.
So the final part of my presentation is on page 343 of your packet. It is a list of all city contracts over $25,000 that were signed during the first quarter. So this is something we've been presenting in the city manager report, and it's now part of this report. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions or comments, Deputy Mayor Burien?
Thank you. This is great. Thank you very much for this financial report. Just 2 questions, and I wasn't sure where to find this, so I'm going to just jump in here. And I'm not even sure what this is called. I think it's the transportation impact fee. But when a new business or a business expands their place of business, or a new business moves in and does renovation of the space that they do, they have a transportation impact fee assessed?
Yeah,
Is that correct?
sort of. Yes is the short answer. If it's a similar use or a use of lesser intensity, the answer is no. But if you're a new business, like say you're a grocery store moving into a building that had a less intense use, there's a traffic impact fee that can be assessed.
So where does that revenue show up in this financial report?
It's not in this report because we presented the capital projects like they were previously. It is in the budget.
Okay. Would we be able to see that revenue source in this quarterly?
You know, we could work on a way to figure out how to present that. It's kind of included in the budget authority for those projects. So the
So
revenue
it goes into,
sources are.
so the transportation impact fee then gets absorbed into the capital projects.
It gets appropriated into those projects.
Okay, so
We could pretty simply display that.
We could work on a way to.
okay, that'd be great.
Sure.
And then the other question is, there's some transfer outs. One of them in particular on page 336 for the expenditures for general funds. I was wondering if we could get a description of where those dollars go. So there's transfer out $476,000. It's in the budget. It hasn't been transferred out yet. So I'm just thinking ahead, when it does get transferred out, will we be able to know where those dollars?
Right, there's a page in the budget that lists what all the transfers are to and from by fund.
So I'm more curious about having, you know, I'm hoping that this is like the first time we've seen this quarterly report, and I would love to be able to see those transfers. I mean, it doesn't look like there's many of them in the report. Is it possible to include that in the quarterly?
Yeah, it's one single page in the budget, 1-4.
Mm-hmm.
There's not really a way to display the transfers as they happen. We can include the budget so you know.
Right, but there isn't a way to do that in the quarterly report as they get transferred out where it goes to?
Well, yeah, it'll be really hard to read.
Okay, thank you.
We could certainly include the budget page for
Right.
just a continual reference.
So you can see the
No, that's not necessary, because I have the budget at home, so I can look at that. But thank you.
Councilmember Andrew.
Thank you for putting the effort into it. So thanks for walking the council through it. It really helps us on lines that are very small amount of numbers. I did also have a question about the transfers out. In some cases, there's like $800,000 in one and $550,000. There's a lot of money that adds up that's going somewhere, but it's not really relatively noticeable where it's going or what's going to be used for.
Right, the page shows each fund that transfers out. So I'll attach that next time.
And the other question I had was on page 343. These are contracts that are over 25,000. And the second one from the bottom, the domestic abuse women's network, it says it's 48,000, but Burien share is only 8,000. I was wondering why that was included.
Because the contract is 48,000. So we have the regional contracts, so each city works together on.
Okay. Are we lean on it?
We're lean on this.
That's right. Okay. The other question I had is going through the packet this weekend for the domestic abuse women's network. It says here that the amount contracted is 8,000. On page 79 of the packet, which is the voucher layout, it shows that there was a payment to Dawn for 12,000.
So when we're lead city, we also pay for all the cities, and then we bill them and they reimburse us.
Okay, so
Sometimes you'll see us reimbursing City of Brenton, City of Auburn for the contracts that they're lead cities on.
Okay, that helps explain that. It's a transfer. Okay. And then the third one was in the think the city manager's report, there's a couple line items about Dawn also that shows an 8,000 and a 2,000. So I had 10,000, 8,000, and 12,000 numbers going through my head when I was looking through these, trying to figure out how they all.
We try to make it as hard as possible.
Thanks.
Okay, seeing no further comments then, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to, without putting too fine a point on this, this is good news, and it's extraordinary news. You can go to any of our neighbors, you won't see this. I know we were correctly concerned at the end of 2012 using some of the reserve fund to balance the budget. Kim knew when she was building the budget that everything, generally when there's a budget, you look out a year, 2 years, you know things are going to happen that you're unclear about. You just don't know, but things happen. The way Kim built this budget was that it was kind of spring-loaded towards good things happening. And that's why we hired her. But the point I really want to make is that we are in a very solid financial condition, far superior to virtually any other city that I'm aware of by a long shot. And it's true that we don't have the resources as many other communities, but the fact of the matter is we run a very lean, tight ship that doesn't have a lot of redundancy, that maybe doesn't have as many code enforcement officers or things like that that we could have. But the reason that we have this sort of news to bring you is for that reason. We've made a conscious decision as a city to have a very strategic set of services offered to our residents. And so I really wanted to underscore the fact that I can't say we're doing well, because when you say we're doing well, it feels like there's money pouring in. The fact of the matter is we're right where we should be, and we've paid back the reserves that we thought might take longer to pay back, and we're on target to have a really decent year and a decent next year. Structural deficit, becomes critical 2 years farther out than we thought it was going to be. Gives us a little more time to work on some recurring revenue streams and that sort of thing. So I wanted to compliment Kim. Not easy. You'd think that putting together a document like this would be a no-brainer, and I think she's spent 40, 50, 60 hours on this. And we're hoping not to repeat that. We think we can automate some of it, but this really is good news, and I just wanted you to celebrate for a minute, because this budget was a product of your policy guidance, truly, so it's a good thing.
Thank you. Thank you again, and just for future reference, I guess my request would be that anything that can be automated and not take a great deal of work, we would appreciate, but if something would take a great deal of work, I think, I personally, I can live without it. We've got the budget we can refer back to, and if we have specific questions, of course, we can follow up with you and then ask for it at that time. Councilmember Clark, did you have something?
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to thank the staff, because you have been very forward-looking for a long number of years. We've lost a lot of revenue with the climate initiatives before the recession, and then the liquor tax recently, and each one of those has been hits to our budget that we have managed to survive. Not always that grumpy about it. But you have also looked ahead at the fact that, like, the King County Jail was costing us a lot for the part that we had to pay into that. And we tried sending our misdemeanors over to Yakima, and that again was a little bit costly. But your idea of working with neighboring cities to build a jail for our folks and locating it so that our police officers don't have such a long trip down to take people down to the jail, so that we could take care of those folks in jail at a much less cost to our budget than we were with King County. Things like that have factored in to the good shape our budget is in. There are probably a lot of others if I put my mind to it, but that has always stood out to me as an excellent example of your forward thinking, and I want to thank you for that.
And I would really, again, I want to thank council. We don't do any of these things in a vacuum. Clearly, everything we do is a result of your policy direction, whether specific or general. We can disagree, and we often do, but at the end of the day, this is the product, so it's a good one.
Okay, well, thank you again. Next up, we have a discussion of modification to the Burien Cares contract.
Good evening, Mayor Bennett, council members, Mayor Nguyen, Geo Management, and the City Manager Department. The purpose of this agenda items on council package, page 345, is for council to discuss modification to the Burien CARES contract. Currently, our contract with CARES runs through May 30th, 2014. At the April 15 City Council meeting, representatives from the Regional Animal Service of King County confirmed that the estimated annual net cost to Burien for King County Animal Services to provide their service to us would be $332,000 per year. As follow-up, council would like to know, would like to have two question answer. The first question is the reason that King County charged the city of SeaTac a lower service fee than the cost estimate given to us. Mr. Sean Buffo, the finance administrator from King County, responded that SeaTac has 43% less in population, 49% less in service call, 30.4% less in animal intakes, and 54% less in licenses compared to the city of Burien. In short, SeaTac and Burien are different in both population and utilization measures. The second question that council would like to know is that what can King County Animal Services provide to Burien for $170,000 per year? Mr. Buffo responded that under the interlocal agreement between King County and the surrounding jurisdiction, that this option is not doable. There are no a la carte options, meaning that all three services are required, and King County does not offer a lower level of service option. So staff tonight would like to present amendment number 2 to the 2011 to 2014 contract for animal control services between the city of Burien and CARES. And you can find that amendment on page 369 of the council package. The highlight of the amendment is as follows. Number 1, extending the contract from May 30th, 2014 through May 30th, 2016. Number 2, to increase the total contract cost from $120,000 annually to $170,000 annually. Number 3, increase this amount annually by the cost of living adjustment equal to that given to city staff, and this increase shall not exceed 3%. Number 4, a lump sum of $15,000 to be made upfront to CARES to address some of the immediate needs as identified in the McFigure report. And finally, add to the scope of work to action to remedy operational issues identified in the report. There are several options here for council to consider. The first option is to discuss the amendment number 2 to the contract as written and place it on the consent agenda at the next council meeting. Number 2 is to modify the contract and place it on the consent agenda at the next meeting. And number 3 is to not approve the amendment to the contract. So this concludes the presentation and happy to answer the question council may have.
Any questions or comments, Councilmember Robinson?
I had one comment on the proposed amendment on provision number 2 about compensation. Page 369 of the packet. If you go, the contract we have now has a life contract limit in it also, so that needs to also be changed if we're going to change the annual rate.
Life of contract?
Yeah, it's, there's the total over the, from June 15, 2011 through May 30, 2014 shall not exceed $360,000. So if we're going to raise the annual rate, that needs to be changed. And then other than that, I think that this is, these proposals are appropriate and address the concerns we've been hearing over the last year. And the issues raised in the audit, we're asking CARES to do quite a bit more than they over their head a little bit with that contracted amount. And for the services they're providing, they were asking to do more services and upgrade, and that takes money. And I think it's appropriate, we're asking them to make some capital improvements as part of these changes, so I think it's appropriate to put the 2 extra years in there. It'll be interesting to see what happens when this comes up for reconsideration in 2016.
Councilmember Clark?
Thank you. I watched the study session last week on television. I wasn't here because I had a surgery. And I would like to make some comments. But bear in mind, I will be, when we're ready to vote on this, I will be in this vote. But there was a comment by Ms. Wagner about having been misled from the beginning or something to that effect. And I categorically refute that this or any Burien council has engaged in an effort to mislead the residents on any issue. There are 7 council members, and I feel that the anti-CARES group relied on only 1 or 2 council members for their information. I am sorry to say that these council members have not always communicated with the city manager or indeed other council members, so their understanding of the reasons for withdrawing from King County in the beginning were lessened. From the beginning, this council has said that King County came to us with a request on a short timeline for something in excess of $300,000 plus license fees for continued county service. We were aghast because we spend about $200,000 on human services. This situation seemed very upside down to this council member. In meetings with the city manager, I encouraged them to find an alternative because we simply could not afford what the county was asking. Subsequent conversations with other council members went much the same way, and the city manager, at the direction of the majority of the council, did explore alternatives. This outcome was a suggestion to see if there was a local group that was interested. Deborah George herself, an animal lover, proposed to start the nonprofit CARES. From the beginning, the council proposed approving $120,000 for this service. There is a simple formula for this: approximately $60,000 from license fees and $60,000 from the general fund. That is what was said at the beginning. That is exactly what Mr. Martin said to Ms. Wagner a few weeks ago here in this chamber. It is clear that she did not understand this concept, but not understanding a simple concept is quite different from being misled. I am an animal lover and very much appreciate the work CARES is doing. They have already begun to implement the improvements, the ideas listed in the auditor's report. No new business starts out doing 100% correctly on everything. They will continue to improve. At the end of this contract, their service will be much better than it is today. I also want to thank the animal-related businesses who have located next to CARES. They are providing a needed service for the animals and their owners in our community. This is a great example of local economic development with local businesses keeping the money in the community. And lastly, I want to thank the multitude of volunteers who help strengthen the service CARES provides. They will have much to do with the success of our animal control. So again, I will be a yes vote.
Councilmember Gill.
I want to address or ask, I guess, the city manager, never in our original contract did we ask for cat care in any way. So what CARES has done is responded to the community on specific instances where they have been asked directly to involve themselves in some sort of cat care. But that's not a part of the contract, is it?
No, they've done that entirely voluntarily.
Yes.
Outside the contract.
Mm-hmm. And they're doing it because they think it's a worthwhile service to give to folks who are demanding some kind of animal care that the contract doesn't offer. My second comment is 120,000 was generally an arbitrary number, an arbitrary low number that the original contractor agreed to, found out it was unreasonable in order to conduct the terms of the contract. but that number has stuck in the way we've administered this contract. So in order to provide a more viable CARES product, you're asking us to increase the budget enough to add the services that Ms. McVickers asked as a part of her audit finding. It's not that we're increasing the services by 50,000 just because there's a list of tasks that she felt needed to be implemented in order to make it a viable nonprofit service.
Yes, Mrs. McVicker, who is a star in the constellation of animal care in the state, said that she said that there were certain things that in order to take this agency to the next level, there were certain things that should be done. She did this, of course, at the request of council, which had asked for kind of an operating audit to see how it was operating. The council had always, from the very beginning, said that one of their chief concerns was the humane treatment of animals, and that that animals were generally well cared for. And Ms. McVicker confirmed that. She said they were performing the contract. She noted that they were underfunded. She noted that the executive director was not paying herself, still doesn't, and that they were generally doing a lot of things that were out of their scope. In addition, she also said they needed to do different, when it came to certain types of cleaning and professional appearance and things like that. She had a number of very solid suggestions, and she made those suggestions with an eye towards her experience, which is like 34 years in the animal control business. And she saw this as a viable startup in the first stages of starting up, and she was looking to take them to the next level. And I would be very pleased if council would allow us to bring her back in a year perhaps and have her checked and see how we're doing and make sure that we are remaining on the road that she set us on. I don't feel like I could ever pass, because this has been just something that's been so much in public. I just got through looking at a quarterly budget report. This service is discretionary. We don't have to do this service. As Councilmember Clark pointed out, this rivals the amount of money we spend on direct human services. Further, this service in the 3 years that has been in place, regardless of how you cut it, have saved us well in excess of $500,000 to the general fund. Over the 3 years that this contract was extended, it will save pushing $900,000. And that's if we keep licensing at the same level it is now. We expect it to go up. We're talking about very serious money here, savings that we have been unable to wring from any other area of the general fund. It's true, we could offer more extravagant services. I don't agree that the council offered, or the county offers better services. I think they offer lesser services, and I can prove it. But if we were to want to provide these higher levels of service, so barking dogs, stray cats, and that sort of things, we would have to pay for that. Part of the strategy this community and the council and the staff have always had is providing the basic level of service that we have to provide and what we can pay for and what we can afford. This service once was in the public sector. It was going to triple in cost. We moved it to the community-based nonprofit, so the money's coming back. The tax dollars are coming back to the community. It's been a success by any measure. And I get weary of hearing it's not, because I'm very, very proud of the people who are doing it, and I'm proud of the council for taking a risk on this. It's been difficult. I hope that we're past the worst of it now, and I look forward to having CARES here in 25, 30, 50 years. It's something the community's proud of, and they'll look back on this and go, what was all the argument about? I had to get my soapbox there. If I didn't, Jan was going to do it.
I agree that the contract should be extended through 2016. The public comment that this should go out to bid, to me, that's just repeating all the startup errors again to put this out to bid. I think the stability of providing the service through 2016 gives CARE the experience that they need to take a nonprofit startup into a nonprofit operating agency. And based on the services they've given and the things that they do, I have no doubt that all they can do is improve the services. When I looked at the original bid from King County, I agree, it's less service, it's a larger area. We have the same amount of service calls for our 7 square mile city compared to, what was it, 1,500 miles that they operate with 4 officers, including driving to Vashon for a call. It just makes no sense to use King County when we offer the same type of service. We have the very equivalent adoption rate. The message goes out very quickly to the blogs if there's a dog that's been lost or found. And I think it's a very community-oriented service, and we would never get that level of service with King County. And I'm very pleased that this council took the risk to move forward with working with this nonprofit in a startup mode.
So I was just actually speaking with someone who's very experienced in local government recently, and he was oblivious to our animal control issue, but he just commented that animal control is always the third rail of local government. So I think that I think Mr. Martin, you're being a little bit optimistic in saying that in several decades we'll wonder what the argument was about. I think we'll always be arguing about it, but nevertheless, we have saved a tremendous amount of money, and CARES has done a tremendous amount of work on our behalf. With that, so do we have then consensus to put this on the consent agenda for approval of the modifications?
Yeah, with the one change.
Yeah, we'll incorporate that on the Ross's change. So I see 1, 2, 3, 4 yeses. So that gives us at least the consent we need.
Thank you very much.
Okay. With that, we'll go on to the next agenda item, which is city business.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just get the right page here. You know, I mark this page before I go to council every time, and then it always catches me off guard when you actually get to it. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. A few things I just want to call your attention to. We've already talked to you at length about the stranded whale. As an aside on that, we absolutely considered that a victory. It was a great way to show off the park. Saw, I don't know, a couple of thousand people that haven't been to the park in a long time. I will confess that it was also a city manager's nightmare, because I had envisioned the possibility of not being able to remove the critter for several weeks, and it wouldn't have been fun anymore. And we also would have attracted some degree of notoriety. So we all high-fived at a successful removal of the whale. It's just something I knew you'd be interested in. It's a small thing, but you probably, I think I had told you that we had a water line problem at the Mosher Art Center. That's important, especially because it's such a heavily used facility for us. And we fixed that for about $18,000. Item number G on page 384. I mentioned this earlier. Council can take great pride in the fact that this phase of the project has gone forward as absolutely as good as possible. We had nowhere near the same problems that we had on the first phase in terms of the business disruptions, business complaints, and things proceeded as well as they could have possibly on a project like this. Seattle City Light continues to have its idiosyncrasies that we're working through, but Maya did a bang-up job on this. We can't declare victory yet. There'll be a final lift of asphalt that's going to go on those 6 blocks here in another probably 2 to 3 weeks. We have to wait for just the right time, the window in the weather, but that's going along really well. Those are really the big items. Kind of the intangible that I did want to mention to council was something that's hard to quantify, but we've really reached an important tipping point in the Northeast Redevelopment Area project. And I'm not exaggerating when I tell you we had, I walked into rooms that had various meetings on that project that contained 15 to 20 very bright people from 4 or 5 different agencies who were fully engaged in this project. We expect to break ground on the drainage part of this in September. As you know, the off-ramp is under full design as we speak. They're out there doing surveying. We're talking to people who are interested in the economic development of that area. This is a massive project that it'll take time to recognize, but will probably be one of the single most important economic development projects that we've had in the city for forever and maybe for a long time. So we're very pleased with the partnerships that have developed with the port, the school district, the Department of Ecology, and a few others. We have some things we still need to do that we'll be returning to you for approval. But I don't know when it comes time for a project like this, you say this is the moment. We need to acknowledge that something very, very large and good has started. But I feel like we've reached that moment. And we are very optimistic about future funding for the eastbound off-ramp. And for the moment, things are hectic, but that's how we like it. So with that, I'd be glad to try to answer your questions.
Okay, any questions? Councilman Clark.
Mr. Martin, recently, last week, on Tuesday or Wednesday, there was a power outage up in the North Burien area. It's not North Burien, it's Old Burien. It's down to 136th and First Avenue South, and it was caused by a city light truck, or a waste management truck bumping into some city light lines and bringing the equipment down.
Was it lines or was it the box?
I'm not 100% sure, but the problem is it caused some loss to the businesses up there, especially when they did some of the rewiring backwards, so that there's a restaurant up there. And when they turned the fans on after the outage was taken care of, instead of pumping the kitchen hot air outside, it pumped it into the restaurant itself. And it was
cold
very
outside at the time?
No, it was starting to get warm out there. But I don't know if there's anything we can do to help those folks, but it just seems to me that we should check into it and see what all the details are.
And I'll make a note of that and ask Maya to check on that. We almost always know about that stuff instantly. I'm not real familiar with that one, but we'll check and find out.
Okay, thank you.
There was one other thing I was going to ask Craig to do this, but we also had another milestone of different sorts, and it had to do with removal of buildings in the city here last week, and this is quite a little story.
Yeah, unfortunately, it took 2 years to get to this point, but as you may recall, in November of 2010, I believe it was, there were 2 houses down on the waterfront, one on either side of Three Tree Point, that slid off their foundations and were severely damaged. The city's building division had to condemn them, and we've been working ever since with a number of entities trying to get them demolished and removed, and finally, just in the last few weeks, that's happened. And property owners, I think, who live next to these dwellings are pleased. And it was a real team effort to get to the point where we did. But, we were able to do it without significant expenditures of city resources, other than a lot of staff time went into this. They were both were complicated by the mortgage situations. One was a reverse mortgage. Both involved one involved Fannie Mae, the other involved. Let's see which entity was it. I forget which one, but we at one point we used Congressman McDermott's staff to help put pressure on Fannie Mae. That may have helped. At one point we intervened in a lawsuit that one of the property owners had filed against City Mortgage to put pressure on them. I think that helped. So just a lot of things went into getting us to where we are now. Cooperation with the the state permitting entities, of course, the city's building division and inspectors worked hard on this, as did the community development staff.
So just imagine, you know, we're working on the shoreline, we're bringing in barges with cranes and stuff to tear down. It was a magnificent effort. It was really extraordinary. And Craig's right. The concern for us was obviously, you know, safety and welfare. We were also concerned about these things washing out into the water and becoming obstructions for boats or doing other damage down the road. So the city's interest was in trying to prevent something worse from happening. And every time we'd have a severe storm, I'd look at Craig and, well, you know, it's going to be a high tide, and you know, we talk about it afterwards. But this was literally a 2-year project. It was a big deal.
Okay, any council reports? I'll start off. My family and I ran Coach Glover. It was a wonderful event. So a lot of people attended. And so tremendous volunteer support. So I want to thank all the volunteers who ran it. Councilmember McGill.
This is the month for nonprofits to do their fundraising. I attended 3 events, I think in 2 weeks. The first was the Environmental Science Center, which does such good work in the city of Burien. They had a very successful event, lots of folks attending, more people that I didn't recognize, so the event is getting a wider notice. The second event was the Highline Fund for Excellence, which supports programs that the school district does not support. They just do a grand job. Large attendance, probably 300 people attended, all asked to put money in the pot to make sure that these events continue. And then the third was the New Futures fundraising, and I'm sure 400 people were there. So all of these nonprofits do wonderful work in Burien, and I think sometimes they fly under the radar and don't get the attention that these are not just Burien projects, they're regional projects that supply a great need in Burien. It's always heartwarming to listen to these folks and what they do.
Okay, seeing no further reports, can we get a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.